Well, so we talked about Chicago a bit. We talked about guns. So actually, next week, we aren't 100% sure, but it might be the case that Ty and Jordan go on to Chicago next week for the next leg of the reporting trip. I don't know. I'm sure you guys have heard, although maybe you haven't because for whatever reason, the mainstream news hasn't been covering it to a disturbing degree. But Harith Augustus, who was known as Snoop, he was a community barber, and he was shot by police, shot and killed. And he was actually, within a span of a few weeks, the third black man to get murdered by police. And in this case, it was, they accused him of selling rolled cigarettes or something. And we have the video, we've been able to see a little bit of the video footage. They haven't released it all, but he turned around and they killed him, murdered him.
It's crazy to me that they're not embarrassed to like have to say, oh, we killed him because we thought he was selling rolled cigarettes. Initially, I mean, essentially, that's why they killed him. That's why they started fucking with him and pulled him over. They can try to say, oh, they saw a gun or whatever, like, a gun that was registered to him if they did see it. They probably, a lot of times, what they try to do is after the fact, search for shit. And then hopefully if they find something, that's what they use to try to say, oh, this person had a gun on them. I'm speculating. I don't know. But I do know that remember the last time that they put somebody over, for supposedly, I think at the time he wasn't even selling cigarettes. You know what happened to Michael Brown?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's really disturbing. There have been Black Lives Matter Chicago and some other groups I'll link to in the description too after this. But they've been organizing protests. They've protested at, I think it's the state capitol, the governmental bodies of the city as well. They've been marching. So it's yeah, so a lot's been going on there in Chicago since it happened. I believe it was July 14th. So, but no one's covering it. So hopefully Ty and Jordan will go next week. And there's a lot to it. There was this great article released today in These Times magazine by Aislinn Pooley, and it's called "The Killing of Harith Augustus Shows How Police Violence and Capitalism Are Inextricably Linked." So that weaves into a lot of the topics we've just talked about too, and it's crazy. Definitely read this article because I was reading it and. Just every statistic that she cited shocked me. I mean, 4 out of 5 killed in Chicago by police are black. The black unemployment in the state of Illinois is the highest in the nation, and in some neighborhoods, unemployment is 50%. White Chicagoans have seen their income increase by 33% in recent years. Black Chicagoans, it's decreased by 4%.
And if you think about those statistics, regardless of if you believe it or not, if you do some research, you'll find out that economics is completely linked to crime. Period.
Yes.
No one just, obviously there's an exception, but no one just does crime to do crime. The large amount of the crimes that are committed are crimes committed for money, period. Whether you're selling drugs, whether you're robbing someone, even if you're killing someone, for the most part, it has to do with some drug deals or some things like that. Even if it's gang wars, it's about turf because turf allows you to sell drugs. And so it's all economic. So when you take away resources, jobs, and things like that, people have to survive. We're going to try to survive by any means necessary, and we're going to do what we got to do. And then when you build a climate like that, like the climate in Chicago wasn't built by the people that live in Chicago. That climate was built by that government, built by redlining, keeping people in one place, tearing down different like public services.
Yeah. Well, sorry to interrupt, but this fits right in. Under Rahm Emanuel, they've closed the most number of public schools and half of all mental health facilities. So.
Absolutely. Mental health facilities. Rahm Emanuel, it was either 2015, probably 2014, because I was actually reading this article when we were doing one of the sections in the film is the Chicago section, that the federal government gave $50 million to Chicago to open more community services, community, what do they call, like the community centers and things like that, different resources for Chicago, and start building jobs. He used that $50 million to open a stadium. That's what he did, and gave tax breaks to the developers of the stadium. I forgot the stadium that they were building, and that's what he did with the money. So the climate in Chicago is all built now. Now, once the climate is built, you have to survive in the climate. So then it's perpetuated, obviously, because you have to survive in it. You know what I'm saying? It goes on. People making money. People are becoming used to the climate, and they're killing, unfortunately. But that is, and they don't have the money to move or to do anything. And when you feel like people don't care about you, why do you feel worthy to even care about yourself? You know what I'm saying? You do what you got to do to survive, and it just becomes the wild wild west. But that climate was built by their government. You know what I mean? It goes back history. You can read it. If you want it, you will find it. If you don't want it, you'll make up 11 different reasons on why Chicago, the people of Chicago, are inherently criminals or killers, because of their race. And that's why Chicago is the way Chicago is. But it's not. The reason why Chicago is the way that it is because the government is criminal inherently, historically speaking.
Well, and it's yeah. So with this article, there's a striking quote that goes along with that. It's well, for one thing, Chicago spends a lot of money. It's $1.5 billion per year on its policing, and so when when you have police who are not there to serve the people, to protect the people, all people of Chicago, they're there to protect the elite against, I mean, what they say, the bad black people who are ruining this city in their mind. So they are looking for the Harith, the community barber on the corner of the street. They're the systemic racism, the blatant racism, it's disgusting. So this quote is: policing grew from slave patrols in the South and rich people's guards in the North. Their function remains the same: to adhere to the dictates of the ruling class and to protect their wealth. Today, law enforcement is used to perpetrate union busting, harassment, surveillance, and the terrorizing of populations considered hostile to the ruling class.
So if you think about that statement and what she just said, only thing you have to do is if you guys are old enough to think about back in the day before we had all these, these portable phones, and everyone had a phone and were able to record, police acting a fucking fool. White people was like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's my neighbor. Right. He's amazing. You know what I'm saying? Our kids go to the same school because they didn't understand, because that thing right there. You think about the inception of the police department, what we call the police department. Before, they were overseers. Back in the day when slavery was happening, you would have overseers after Reconstruction, and they would oversee the people that was working in the fields. And after Reconstruction, when people were freed, what they would do, they would have this thing called convict leasing, where they would get people they would like rather, if they did a crime or didn't do a crime, they would like say that they did a crime. And so what they would do is then lease them to different plantations, and they would have to work it off. And then they would have these overseers that would make sure that they got the job done, or if they got away, that they would go find them and things like that. And those overseers, that's why you overseer, overseer, officer. Listen to Public Enemy, you'll get it. But that's the inception of it. So you think about the inception of an institution and what it was built for, then it makes perfect sense that those traits and those practices would still be going on, because that's the foundation. And that's exactly what's going on. If you have a system that was flawed and corrupt to begin with, because it was built to patrol a quote unquote seemed inferior group of people. That's how they felt about black people, and these people that was inherently criminals and inherently animals. Then that foundation, that structure is going to perpetuate itself, and it's going to only thing that's going to happen is things are going to build on that foundation. The foundation isn't going to change. You have to uproot that and change the entire system. You know what I'm saying? If you look at the history of the LAPD, Gates was the chief back in the day. He would recruit ex KKK members from the South and bring them to Los Angeles. This is documented. You can Google this. I'm not just talking shit. You can Google this. This is what he did to patrol LA. You know what I mean? So you think that's almost like martial law. You think about martial law, the reason why the army don't patrol the streets because they aren't trained to patrol like a street, a community, their community. They're the army. They operate in a different way, and you see that anytime, like when they have like the riots, you see how they reacted. You know, the army reacted to civilians. It's completely different. You know what I mean? And if you bring someone with a mentality that's part of the KKK and the attitude towards a certain group of people, that is going to be instilled in the actual the institution that you put them in. Well, not even instilled. It's already instilled. And we're getting people that have this mentality already.
Right.
So they already, you know what I'm saying? We don't have to convince them that no, you need to profile these people and assume that they're guilty just in case. You know what I mean? They don't have to coach them to do that. That's already a part of their DNA. And so they're already in the game when they first start. You know what I mean? So I think it's bad, man.
It's really bad, and right now the community of Chicago is rising up, and hopefully it'll work out, and Ty and Jordan can get out there because it's, I mean, well, switching a little bit, like, is there hope, Ty? Like, we were talking a little bit about this earlier. Like, people have facts, people have feelings. Like, at what point do things change for school shootings, for mass shootings, for police murdering black people all over this country? How can things change? And will they? We keep fighting with journalism, but
Yeah. Um, I honestly, I think that the only way things will change is if the things that happen um, either happen to the people that are passing these laws and drafting the legislation, or just start to happen more to white people in general.
Yeah.
I think one of the bigger problems, and this and you can agree with this or not, but I think it's a great point. If you look at how we view society, our social norms, back in the day when the war on drugs. When Nixon started the war on drugs, obviously one of his right aides came out right before his death and said, we started the drug war to target blacks and hippies. That's why we started it, because that was the enemy to the president. And if you look at what then Ronald Reagan built on with the DARE program, like, it was a war on drugs, which was actually a war on poor people. But you see how they approached it. They were killing people. They were busting. They used to have this thing. I grew up in this shit. They used to have this thing in LA called the Batarram. They called it the Batarram. It was actually a rap song made about it. What the police had was a military tank with this huge pole on it. And that pole will crash through suspected drug homes. And a lot of the homes that would crash were not drug homes at all. And people were dying. And they were killing people. Fast forward. The opium epidemic.
Yeah.
Look at the excuse me, empathy towards that. And it should be, because drug addiction is a serious thing and people need help. But look at the empathy that our country has toward that our government has toward that. The biggest difference and the crack epidemic and the opium epidemic is the people being affected by it. Period. So it seems to me, and I could be wrong, but you will have to show me better than you can tell me, that once it starts to affect white people, once you start to see um, gun violence affect more white communities, once you start to see those things happen, then now you look at like mass shootings. Mass shootings, for the most part, affect white people, but it's they don't even call it a real epidemic. It's like these things that just kind of happen. These it's like outliers. They don't happen all the time. They just kind of, they happen. And so they look at that like some type of special interest group. Like, and we'll deal with that. But the gun problem in America as a whole is majority black minorities that are being affected by the gun issue, really. And the only way I see that we can, because we can fix it, our government can fix it, period. They can, but it takes a lot of fracturing and then probably breaking relationships that they don't want to break, because it's a lot of money involved to do that, and they're too committed. But when it starts to affect their family, things start to change. You look at how many politicians we had back in the day that wasn't for same-sex marriage, and then my daughter's gay. You know what? My daughter came from me, and she's a human. I'm for same-sex marriages. So, a lot of times that's kind of how, we're human, right? We are. I've had situations in my life that I didn't get things. And then once I experienced it, I understand now. You know what I mean? And sometimes it takes that. It takes for you to be affected. So you think about somebody actually personally being affected. You look at people that the survivors, the surviving families that's dealt with mass shootings. The damn, is it on the street? Oh, Jesus. We don't want you there. So
Spider guy, sorry.
so if you look at the families that the surviving families that have been their families have been killed, a running theme, when you see their interview, say, you know what, I never thought it would happen to me. Yeah. And that's what we do. That's over there, and we think it won't affect. It doesn't affect us because it's not our family. And then when it becomes their family, guess what happens? They become activists, which is amazing. It's amazing, and I'm not criticizing anything, but how good would it have been if you would have became an activist when you saw that shooting over there? Yeah. Because if you would have, maybe somehow the shooting that affected you could have been prevented. We don't know. But what I'm saying is we don't want to wait until it affects us before us to become activists. Like, that's a hard pill to swallow. I have to lose a family member before I speak out. It shouldn't take that. We should be able to see, you know what? That family didn't deserve that. And I have empathy towards that because I'm a mother, I'm a father, and I'm going to fight for them. Versus, that was terrible. That's over there though. And now what happens to you? You know what I'm saying? Like, it shouldn't take all that. It shouldn't take for it to happen to us. You know what I mean? We have to have more understanding and empathy, and stop trying to excuse things off for something else. And we know it's not the truth. No one should have to. No one should have to die for us to change, man. It shouldn't. And we want to throw it in their face. We want to throw it in their face, just the same way that back in the '80s, the revolution, or let's say we can go, shit that I've seen on documentaries, but think about like the Vietnam War. You know what I'm saying? The first war in history that the public went against. That's the first war in history that was not supported. You know why? Because it was the first time that journalists were able to go out there and show people what was really going on. Guess what they did? They threw it in their face. They kept it in the media. And people were like, "What the fuck? No, we don't want this war." And that's how we were able to say, you know what? Hey, we're coming home. We fucked up. We're not winning. We're coming home. But before then, think about how LBJ and how Nixon was lying about that. You know what I'm saying? Think about the in the 80s during the AIDS epidemic, and how, because gay people were seen as inferior and less than a man, that they wasn't doing the proper research and getting the money to try to figure out how can we cure this thing. Guess what they did? They rose up and they kept it in the media and they pushed and they made that happen. Like every change that we've had in this country is because we kept it in the media. You can look at documentaries like about the civil rights and see how strategic Martin Luther King was. This shit wasn't just happening, dead ass. Like the shit that you see on the news and people getting beat and the dogs biting and those water hoses, that didn't just happen and the media happened to catch that. Martin Luther King strategically made that happen. And what I mean when I say he made that happen, he knew it was a, what do they used to call him, the bull in Alabama, whatever, the police chief. He knew that police chief and what he would do to try to maintain control of his city. He knew, because that's what he did. He water hose people. He did that. He knew only thing he had to do was be triggered, and he will perform the way he's been performing, but now it'll be on camera. So they were strategic about making that happen so the public and the newspapers can take pictures and show the world, which would then put pressure on the president to do something about that guy. Like that was strategic of keeping it in the public. Like you can read, what book did I read that talked about that? Malcolm Gladwell's new book, David and Goliath. He talks about that and what Martin Luther King them did to keep that shit in the public eye. And the whole theory is how David beat Goliath. It wasn't just this miraculous kid used this thing because he had the help of God. No, he was strategic. It was certain things that happened. It wasn't just some luck of the draw. Things happened to make that happen. And then he used different examples in history of how these, like with the civil rights, how this, it didn't just happen. Like they were strategic about getting that out there and having kids out there. Like that one, it's a one iconic shot where you see this German Shepherd grabbing the hold of this kid's chest. Like that was the iconic picture that went up at that time. Martin Luther King strategically had all high school and junior high kids skip school to protest because he knew that it would be more effective for someone to see a kid being attacked by a dog. Like, yes, we have to keep it in the media. We have to keep an eye on it, because if not, we're going to go on with our lives. And we can't, because we're human. And sometimes you have to push people and hit them in the head to remind them that they are human.